Welcome to a new episode of Inside the Economist's Mind.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into something really crucial, I think, for anyone working with economics or, just trying to understand it better,
Yeah,
how to communicate effectively.
absolutely. It's a huge topic.
Yeah, we've gathered insights from quite a few professionals, mainly looking at LinkedIn, seeing what challenges economists face, and maybe more importantly, how they can actually get better at this.
Right. Because economics touches everything, doesn't it? Prices, jobs, the whole lot. But the way it's sometimes discussed, well, it can feel like a completely different language.
Exactly. So our mission today is really to pull out some practical, real-world strategies, things that can help you, the learner, grasp these ideas without getting tangled up in the complexity or just feeling overwhelmed.
Think of it as decoding the jargon, maybe.
Right.
Making those insights accessible, not just for the experts, but for everyone trying to figure out what's going on economically.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The very first thing that, well, almost everyone seemed to agree on is knowing your audience. Sounds basic, maybe?
It does, but it's so fundamental.
Hmm.
You absolutely have to understand who you're talking to.
Makes all the difference, right?
Totally. I mean, think about the contrast. You've got a policymaker.
Yeah.
They need concise information, focused on implications, what the choices mean. They probably don't have time for, 50 pages of methodology.
Right, they need this, so what, fast.
Exactly. But then, an academic journal. That audience expects all that detail, the technical side, the rigor, different needs entirely.
Spot on. And Sarah Gore really hit on this, simplifying the language, using terms that connect with more people.
And those relatable examples he mentioned, which we'll definitely come back to.
Yeah, and he also brought up visual aids, even collaborating with communications specialists sometimes, sort of bringing in outside help.
Which ties into something interesting. Vera Pandian noted that economists often aren't explicitly trained in communication. Their training is heavy on the analysis, the modeling.
But not necessarily on translating it.
Precisely. So there might be a bit of a gap there when it comes to talking to the public, or even policymakers sometimes.
That makes a lot of sense. Siavash Eftekhari was saying similar things. Cut down the jargon, those technical terms that just, shut people out instantly.
Definitely a barrier.
And again, use relatable examples, but also, crucially, focus on why it matters to that specific audience. And, adapt your style. A formal talk isn't a casual chat.
Christopher Cook had that very direct question, so what?
Yes. Love that.
He basically argues economists sometimes just state the facts, inflation's X, GDP's Y, without spelling out the real-world impact. What does it actually mean for people?
If you don't answer the so what, the message just doesn't land, does it?
Not effectively, no. And Tiago Souza had a really practical take. Actually research your audience. Understand what they know, what worries them, maybe even group them, segment them.
It's like tailoring the message.
Yes, like tailoring the suit, not just offering one size fits all. It's about being precise.
So getting that audience piece right seems like the absolute foundation for everything else.
It really is. Without it, you could have the best analysis in the world, but it might just miss the mark completely.
Okay, so moving on from audience. The second big strategy we saw was about using stories and examples. This feels really powerful for making abstract stuff feel, well, real.
Oh, hugely powerful. Stories give context, right? They create an emotional hook. They show why some economic idea isn't just theory, but actually affects people, communities.
Like, instead of just defining opportunity costs.
Right, you tell a story. Someone choosing between two jobs, what they gave up that makes the concept click instantly. Much more memorable.
Reginald Noguera really emphasized this need for practical, everyday applications, showing how economics plays out when you're, buying groceries or thinking about a mortgage.
Connecting it to daily life. He felt that's key for engaging people beyond the usual economic circles.
Tiago Souza echoed that too. Use everyday experiences analogies. Find ways to simplify the complex by linking it to something familiar.
Like his example, I think, explaining inflation by talking about how a candy bar gets smaller but the price stays the same. People get that intuitively.
That's a great one. Takir Aziz also raised a good point about the disconnect sometimes between the big picture, the macro data like national unemployment.
And what people see on the ground in their own lives.
Yeah. If you're struggling to find work, a headline about falling national unemployment might feel pretty hollow, so connecting those dots is important.
And Kanika Jahan talked about humanizing economic principles, using engaging tales, real situations, bringing in the people behind the numbers.
That feels so important, moving beyond just data points to the actual human experience.
Absolutely. Showing the stories that drive the economy.
Okay, third area. Simplifying and visualizing. Because, let's be honest, economics can get complicated fast. Models, data, it's a lot.
It is inherently complex, and that's exactly why simplification and visualization are so vital. Simplifying isn't dumbing down, it's cutting the noise.
Using plain language where you can, defining key terms.
Exactly. Getting rid of unnecessary jargon, not assuming everyone's an economist, and then visuals, graphs, charts, diagrams.
We mentioned Saurav Gore touched on them, and Kanika Chauhan specifically said how good visuals can cut through jargon, make things accessible for different backgrounds.
A clear chart can tell a story much faster than paragraphs of text, often show trends, relationships.
Alejandro Farr suggested a structured but simple approach, like top-down, start with the main idea.
Yeah, the big picture first, then fill in the details, but always link back so people see how it connects. He stressed boiling things down to simple, memorable takeaways.
It's interesting, Vitor Hugo Nogueira brought up Keynes.
John Maynard Keynes, yeah.
As someone who is apparently brilliant at taking really complex theories and making them understandable, often using visuals back in, a time of massive economic uncertainty.
That's a great historical example. It really shows the power of clarity, especially when you're trying to influence policy or public opinion on critical issues.
So clarity and visuals, definitely key tools. Now, the next strategy. Anticipating and addressing objections. Because, well, people aren't always going to just accept an economic argument, right?
No, and that's perfectly okay. Objections come from all sorts of places. Lack of information, maybe a misunderstanding, sometimes biases, or even just, genuine disagreement based on a different view.
So the idea is to be proactive. Think ahead about what people might push back on.
Exactly. Tiago Souza mentioned showing the audience you're aware of their potential concerns and being ready with solid evidence, good reasoning. It shows you've thought it through.
It builds trust, maybe. Kanika Chauhan made that point. Honestly, acknowledging objections or uncertainties can actually boost your credibility.
It really can. It shows you're not just pushing one narrow view, that you've considered alternatives.
Vitor Hugo Nogueira used that interesting parallel with Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. How King knew the skepticism he faced, the resistance, and he addressed it head-on, appealing to shared values, presenting this powerful vision.
It's about acknowledging concerns, yeah. Providing your evidence, your logic, maybe even pointing out the limits or trade-offs of your own view. It shows nuance.
Okay, and that brings us to the fifth key strategy, actively inviting feedback and questions. This isn't just being polite at the end, is it?
Oh, not at all. It's absolutely vital. Feedback tells you if your message actually landed, where the confusion might be, and it builds rapport. It turns a lecture into a conversation.
Reginaldo Nogueira actually quoted Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate, saying economists need to listen outside their own tribe, talk to people in other fields, the public, understand the real-world problems.
That external listening is crucial. And Tiago Souza talked about creating a welcoming space for questions, making people feel comfortable asking, even if they think it's a basic question.
Showing respect for their input.
Absolutely. And Vitor Hugo Nogueira brought up Socrates, the Socratic method, using questions, that back and forth, to deepen understanding for everyone.
So encouraging questions helps the audience and the economist clarify things.
Definitely. Salim Kadalimbala also added a nice touch, suggesting we welcome questions behind the scenes, too. Some people are hesitant in public.
Good point. And maybe share anonymized answers later.
Yeah, that can benefit everyone.
So those are maybe the 5 big themes. But there were some other interesting points raised too, right? Kind of additional considerations.
Yeah, definitely. Kanika Chauhan reminded us about things like language barriers, cultural differences in communication, and just different learning styles. Not everyone processes info the same way.
Important nuances. And Matt Peronish mentioned potential gaps between economic theory and, say, the practicalities of a specific industry, like energy.
Right. The real-world application might not perfectly match the textbook model. Economists need to be aware of that and adapt.
Salim Kadalimbala also had advice about finding your own communication rhythm. Detailed deep dives sometimes, maybe shorter updates more often. Building your audience that way.
Finding what works for you and them. And Vitor Hugo Nogueira stressed authenticity, empathy. He used Abraham Lincoln as an example, connected with people on a human level, especially when things are divided.
That resonates. People respond to genuine connection.
And finally, Michael Alani Sadibo had some more practical tips. Keep avoiding jargon, use interactive stuff like polls or Q&As, and really tailor messages for different groups.
So it's not just one thing, is it? Effective communication is multifaceted, requires constant attention.
It's an ongoing process, definitely. Sensitivity, adaptability, they're key.
Okay, so wrapping this up for you, the learner. The big takeaways from this deep dive seem pretty clear. First, really know your audience.
Understand who you're talking to. That's number one.
Then, use stories. Use examples to make things relatable, memorable.
Bring the concepts to life.
Simplify where you can. Use visuals to clarify complex ideas.
Make it accessible. Don't hide behind complexity.
Think ahead about objections, address them thoughtfully.
Show you've considered different angles. Build that trust.
And finally, always, always invite feedback. Make it a two-way street.
Foster that dialogue. It's crucial for real understanding.
Yeah, it feels like the shift is from just, telling people economic facts to actually creating understanding and connection.
That's exactly meaningful connection, not just data transmission.
So maybe a final thought for you to consider. The next time you come across economic news or analysis, think about how it's being communicated.
Are they using these strategies? Where could they improve?
And maybe more importantly, how can understanding these communication ideas help you engage more critically, more confidently with all the economic talk that shapes our world?
It really is about empowering yourself to be a more informed participant in these crucial conversations.
Thanks for diving deep with us.